Welcome everyone to episode 21 of Future Strong. Delighted to have you all join this morning and this afternoon, depending where you're dialing in. I feel a little bit guilty because we have guests from the West Coast today, so it's super early. I'll try not to be too loud so I don't wake up any children in the background, Corey. My name is Nikki Gauthier. I'm the co-founder and chief customer officer of Capfinity. Capfinity is a global business, and we use a strengths-based methodology to help identify potential and level the playing field. And we use that across recruitment and development. And we have particular expertise in helping to recruit emerging talent, which is exactly what we're going to talk about today. And as always on Future Strong, before we get into the guests, I must welcome the wonderful Lindsay Pollock.
Thank you, Nikki. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Pollock. I'm a New York Times bestselling author of 4 books. My latest is Recalculating, Navigate Your Career Through the Changing World of Work. I'm also a keynote speaker. And my big news is yesterday, for the first time in 1 year, 4 months, and 19 days, I was in front of a live audience of emerging talent, and it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. The energy was amazing. It was such a human reminder of what we do and why we do it, to have those faces directly in front of me. They laughed audibly at some of my jokes, so I could hear them. And
you still got it, Lindsay. You still got it.
I was a little nervous, but this is why we do the work that we do, and I know that our guests feel the same way. So I'm delighted to welcome Wahab and Corey, and we won't do you justice. So Wahab, we'll start with you. Can you introduce yourself to our Future Strong audience? Welcome.
Sure. Nikki, Lindsay, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you all. As Lindsay mentioned, my name is Wahab Owolabi, and fundamentally, I'm just really passionate about early career talent. I think we talk a lot about diversity, increased representation at all levels of industry. And I have this sort of philosophy that if you don't start at the top of the funnel, how will you ever make progress later down the line? So throughout my career, I've really focused on opportunities to contribute to that. A couple of those are, building the recruiting program at a startup called OneReq. Before that, in Andreessen Horowitz, working in venture capital to increase access there, and also building the community for recruiters of early career talent and recruiting leaders, which is OneReq and URX. And I've had the pleasure of working with Corey for quite a bit over the last few years. And so, Corey, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, awesome. Well, good morning, good afternoon. I don't know how many people are good evening, but if you're out there, good evening to you as well. As Wahab mentioned, my name's Corey Twitty, and I've been in the early talent, emerging talent recruiting space for the last 10 plus years or so. And I think one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it is I've been a huge beneficiary of it and programs to help get more representation in the business world. I grew up, both my parents were educators, and I thought I was going to grow up and be a teacher, because really there was nobody in my circle that looked like me that were in these types of roles. And so I didn't even know that many of them existed. And so I thought I was going to go this one path, and I started to find really amazing diversity programs, management leadership for tomorrow being one of them. And that opened up my world to just a whole, new world of opportunities. And so as I sort of think about, my personal true north and why I'm so passionate about this space, is because it really allows you to create access and opportunities for students, and to really, again, along the way, build their capabilities, give them the playbook to really unlock their potential. Because that for me I didn't even know half the things I was capable of until there were people that kind of put that in front of me. And so, I really feel like, it's my purpose to kind of do that and push that forward for others.
It's so great to hear, Corey. And we want to just delve a little bit more into both of your kind of experiences and backgrounds and motivation in this space, particularly supporting emerging talent. And Corey, we can hear some of that already. But Wahab, Lindsay and I had the pleasure of being part of OneReq and URX on several occasions, but one that really sticks out for me is last December we got to keynote It was very late my time. It didn't feel it. It didn't matter that it was dark outside. But we keynoted, and Jada Green from Accenture joined us. And really what we were then, I guess, kind of privileged to was this absolutely incredible online community where, aside from just, I guess, the keynote and the discussion, we then had these hop-in round table experiences. And it was for me like everyone was in the same room. And I had dialogue that evening with, and it was much later for them, people in Sweden, from TikTok. I had dialogue from people who were on the West Coast, the East Coast. It was just this very eclectic group of individuals who wanted to support emerging talent. And it really didn't matter where we were in the world or the fact that we were communicating virtually. It was completely unique, and we've obviously gone on to do things since because of that. But will you just share kind of how have you kind of put OneReq together? You've got people like Shah who are incredible, the team that you've built. It'd be brilliant just to hear kind of how that's come off and how you've done it in the middle of a pandemic as well.
Yeah, well,
you make it look so simple. Come on.
Well, it's not so simple. First and foremost, you mentioned Shar, and I think ultimately I've got to really basically just acknowledge that a lot of what you see is really not me anymore, frankly speaking. We've got amazing people who are so incredibly passionate about this space that want to volunteer their time to help all of us succeed, because they understand that when we succeed in this industry, the nature of that is that students and candidates of all different backgrounds succeed, right? And when that happens, our companies win, right? Like that, like it's an amazing sort of, I would say, like community and ecosystem that has developed when people start to realize that. And the common thread is that we're all passionate about this. We started off as URX on 5.5 years ago. It's crazy to think about. And probably the most important thing I did was I just sort of said, hey, I'd like to find other people like me who are in this role, not for any personal gain, but because they realize the amount of impact that they can have. And, maybe what I can share with everyone is, for me, I would say maybe 4 years ago, I took a step back and I said, hey, how can I have even more impact? I was running the talent programs team at Rubric, and I really enjoyed helping the one-to-one relationships with candidates. And I thought, frankly, maybe I was crazy to think this, but I felt, hey, I'd love to see other people and other companies approach this in a similar way. But also, I'd love to learn from other people. Like, what are the things that I may not be doing to support my candidates that I can be doing? And I felt like the best way that I could have some scale to impact as many candidates as possible is through recruiters. They're the front line of any company. They're the ones that set the employer brand for any company. And so if we can influence the recruiters of companies to engage talent in an amazing way, improve candidate experience, improve diversity recruiting outcomes, that's our goal. Fundamentally, we want to help build a diverse and inclusive workforce for everyone. And so that's OneReq, and then specifically URX is specifically focused on university recruiting and emerging talent, where my passion is.
So Nikki and I were chatting earlier that we talk so much about the candidates, right, and the emerging talent, and where I think this conversation might go is really the profession itself of being a recruiter, and the community and the mentoring in that field. We're all obviously familiar and involved with NACE, National Association of Colleges and Employers, and the rise of OneReq and URX. Corey, I want to go to you as a leader or an emerging leader in this field of university recruiting, and really the intersection with diversity too. And you've mentioned Management Leadership for Tomorrow. We're talking about URX. How do you see kind of the whole universe of this industry and this field? We talked about what got you interested in it, but where do you see it going? And what do you think are kind of the key issues that you're talking about at that level of the profession itself?
Yeah, Lindsay, I think that's it's a really great question. And I think that's a question that we all are continuing to work on together, right? I think I think it goes back to, Wahab's point and really, the power of community. I think, and one of the reasons why I've been so appreciative of the URX and OneReq community, because we're all going through similar challenges. And as a leader, it's like, wait, what are you learning? What are you hearing? And so I think that there's been a lot of power in just saying, hey, how do we all unite together and think about this from an industry perspective, and not how can we win the best talent, and how can we go and like, really do the individual best thing for all of our companies, as opposed to, this concept of all boats rising. And if we all kind of learn from each other and then let the candidates decide, right? I think, hey, we have an amazing opportunity, an amazing, company in Netflix, and that's going to be great for some people. That's also not going to be great for everyone, right? And so instead of trying to wrestle against each other, how do we all sort of put our collective energy together and making it a more equitable experience for everyone, right? And so I think, what I've started to see and observe is, I think one of the silver linings that's come out of the move to virtual is really companies are now able to widen and open the aperture of where they've historically gotten talent from. And so I think that that's been able to really level the playing field for a lot of students. With that, though, now there's more competition. Now there's more, just more opportunity, which is great. But as a recruiting profession, now how do you find them, right? There's so many tools out there, and it's how do you find those candidates in an equitable way, right? And so I think that those are all of the things that, we're thinking about, as leaders. And so, and again, there's not one right path. And it will really depend on what are the sort of unique talent challenges that you're trying to solve at your company or institution.
Wahab, I get a sense you wanna hop in there too to what Corey said. I've got 2 or 3 questions, but which bit did you want to react to?
Well, no, I mean, I'm sort of like sitting here like, yes, Corey, preach, So I obviously I believe in community. I believe in collective impact. I love the kind of the terminology that Corey used in terms of all boats rising. What I always stress, I mean, if anybody's heard me talk, I always talk about this idea of we spend so much time historically in this emerging talent space, sort of competing for what we could think is a zero-sum game of like a talent pool, right? So just there's 1,000 amazing candidates this year, and we've got to go get our share of that, right? Versus thinking strategically about, well, let's say you're right? We're not going to get into this pipeline problem, and hopefully people see my air quotes here, but if you're right, there's only 1,000 great candidates. Well, why don't we come together to turn that number from 1,000 to 2,000, from 2,000 to 4, to 8, to 16, and on and on and on. And that's what I try to stress. And I think we need more folks like Corey and others that I work with and are part of this community who think about it in that way. And then fundamentally, I also agree with this concept of, every candidate isn't going to be the best fit for every company. My first job out of college was as a college admissions counselor at Carnegie Mellon University, so love Pittsburgh. Shout out to everybody in Pittsburgh. And one of the things that I learned is, look, Carnegie Mellon doesn't say, hey, don't go look at any other colleges. We've accepted you. Come to Carnegie Mellon, right? Universities say, hey, go look everywhere, explore, discover. We believe that when you look at what you're looking for in your career, your life, your journey, and you compare that against what we have to offer, that we're going to be the best fit for you, right? And we want to make sure that you've seen all of your options, you've seen all of your opportunities, and then you choose us because it's the best fit for you, right? I'd love to see more of that in our industry.
And just to comment, really, sorry, Nikki, just to comment on.
No, I'm loving it. I mean, Lindsay and I can just watch. It's fine. I've got a couple of things, but Lindsay's just making her summary points.
I'm just nodding.
You've only got
and taking notes. Nodding
You've only
and
got
taking
3
notes.
points. Maybe we make it 5 today.
You know, and I think the one thing I just wanted to jump and just piggyback on what Wahab was saying is, you know, as we think about, you know, the future of work and just this thought of the candidate pool, whatever that total addressable market is, you know, I think it's going to be really prudent for companies to think about really what is their responsibility in expanding the talent pool. And, you know, that's one of the things that I've just been so just proud of what we've been able to accomplish at Netflix over the last year in our Pathways Bootcamp and partnering with HBCUs, expanding that you know, program this year to additional Hispanic serving institutions to really, again, create and expand the talent pool, and then to really build and accelerate, you know, the student capabilities that folks are already learning, and then exposing them to all of these different opportunities that exist, you know, across many different industries.
You're going right in the direction that I wanted you to, Corey, because and I think Lindsay's on the same page with this. I'm slightly aggravated when people want to discuss the war for talent, because you've automatically shrunk the talent pool. We're all thinking that we've got to go to war and fight. So the concept of all boats rising, I adore. But what do you think we do to actually kind of get other people, your fellow colleagues in recruitment, onto a page where we're not at war with each other?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I mean, you know, I'd love to kind of get Corey's thoughts on this as well. You know, my first thought goes to this concept of it's not a zero-sum game. And we have to start to realize that, look, you think about any market, right? And when you look at a market and you think to yourself, okay, what's the total addressable market? It's of a certain size. People in that market all work together to increase, right? Yes, they compete, but fundamentally, they all want their industry market size to grow, right? I guess if I can sort of, you know, reframe it in a different way, I'd say right now we compete in this industry for discovery, right? So we compete to find talent, and it's so always funny to me when I think about it, because we compete to find talent that is inherently looking for us, right? Like, think about that. Like, they are looking for us, and we are sort of like competing to discover them, versus competing for the outcome, right? Competing for the hire, right? So, you know, name your 2 or 3 companies that a candidate might have a couple of different offers from. That's the point of competition. Like, that's where, hey, we've got a ton of offer here at our company, and we think you'd be great here. We'd love to have you. That's where the competition needs to happen. So it's not so much that we shouldn't compete. It's like, when does that competition happen? It shouldn't be at the top of the funnel, right? When you're sort of just trying to discover who is excited about, you know, maybe a software engineering internship in tech, or a sales development role in accounting or something, right? Let's move that competition to the outcome stage where folks have offers and they're thinking about what's going to be the best fit for them.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add, I think there's a couple things. I think on the first thing I would share is, one, I think because of the university recruiting and emerging talent space is changing so rapidly. You know, if you look over the last 18 months, like, it's evolving and changing and growing, and so many of us are going through things for the very first time. Naturally, the walls, I think, are starting to lower, and to just be like, let me pick up the phone and ask, like, what is my peer doing over here? What is my peer doing over there? And then let's actually like brainstorm and talk about this together, because we're all going through these new and changing things again so quickly. So I think that naturally the walls are starting to just lower a bit. The other thing that I would share is, I think we all have to really just take a step back and remind ourselves, like, what is our why, and really keeping the students in the front and in the center and everything that we do. And so it actually doesn't benefit us to really push students in a particular direction, because I think what we're seeing from a larger workforce trend, right, is you kind of think about this great resignation happening, right? And so, hey, like maybe you win short term, but if people aren't happy, they're gonna leave. And more than ever, I think people want to be seen and valued and as human at work, as an individual. And so I think that it doesn't do you any service to try to, force that, early on.
Just wanted to comment that Trudy Steinfeld, our friend at CapFitty, has commented the talent pool is much larger if you look through a different lens and not the old criteria. Totally agree with Wahab and Corey. I know that both of you, and you've mentioned Pittsburgh, Wahab, Corey, you and I share Connecticut as a home state. So I want to talk East Coast, West Coast, because I do think there's some differences, and both of you are now firmly in the Silicon Valley ethos. Do you see any differences? Do you see any lessons? The Valley often does talk about culture and belonging in a different way than some of the more traditional, financial services or accounting institutions. Would you think there are any lessons or differences with the Silicon Valley ethos compared to other places? Wahab, how about you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess over the last, year and a half, what's kind of happened is we all sort of culture means something a bit different now, right? So culture doesn't mean how nice your office is, or how many free meals you get. So it's incredibly important how companies are thinking about differentiating themselves. In the past, within our community, we've had a lot of conversations where folks who had companies that were not on the coast, right? So maybe they were based in the Midwest, Chicago, other cities, have felt like, wow, it's really difficult to compete for candidates who like just firmly, hey, I want to be in San Francisco, I want to be in the Bay Area, or hey, I want to be in New York. And now I think we're seeing a lot of conversations around, well, those are no longer barriers, right? Everybody is either remote or has some level of a hybrid remote experience. And so I think what's sort of happened for folks on the coast is that competitive advantage is sort of been diminished a little bit. And I think folks are trying to figure out now how to communicate the value of their culture, the uniqueness of the experiences that they have to offer without that physical interaction. And it's difficult. It's very difficult.
The next question is Nikki's, but I did want to publicly apologize that I did not even acknowledge anywhere in the world other than East Coast, West Coast. So that is such a New Yorker view that I did that. So thank you for correcting me. Corey, if you want to weigh in, and then Nikki.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, I think there's actually very similar themes that we're all going through as a workforce. And so when you think about, the last 18 months, you think about navigating a pandemic, you think about, work from home, you think about social unrest and systemic racism, you think about all of these things, whereas companies can no longer decouple who you are as an individual, your personal life, and then how you show up and bring that to work. And so that intersectionality of what you do outside and in are all converging together. And whether you're a company on the East Coast, the West Coast, in the UK, wherever you are, companies have to actually address that and ensure that, psychological safety exists on teams to ensure that people can really show up authentically. And again, because as I mentioned before, people will just leave, right? And so I think that it's something that all organizations are addressing, and I think top of mind, regardless of where you're situated from a location perspective.
Amazing points, and I think I could dive into this particular one all day, but I'm gonna resist. Prior to coming on air, we hit upon a topic in the sort of backroom chit chat. That's a British word, if anyone's not familiar with it. And we were discussing mentoring, and Lindsay and I were sharing that we have seen a rise of the mentoring of candidates, not just once they're inside organizations, but actually in the preparation. Lindsay this week's been fronting a big program at HSBC where they're investing heavily across the US and the UK in really helping candidates prepare, but particularly underrepresented candidates. You had both mentioned that actually mentoring recruiters is something that you're focused on. And Wahab, I hadn't considered this, I hadn't heard about it. I'd love you to share a little if you're happy to, because I think that's an incredible thing that perhaps we can learn from.
Yeah, sure. So I'm trying to think about where I should start. So, first, and I think earlier I mentioned that a lot of these things, I think people sort of look to me as doing everything, and I'm absolutely not. So I want to give, in the space of answering this question, so I want to give an amazing, just like thank you and gratitude to Lane Austin, who's actually a new member of Corey's team at Netflix, LaJourne Lays, who is at Zoom, Larry Kamugia, and I apologize if I mispronounce his last name, who is at Salesforce, who, for everything I'm going to talk about, is really born out of their work, right, and their passion, their volunteerism. So with OneReq, we have two things that we do. One is the OneReq Recruiter Academy, which is specifically focused on getting more underrepresented people and people of color into recruiting roles. And so we focus on recent grads who are not currently in recruiting, or folks who are about to graduate from university and who have an interest in joining the recruiting profession and industry. So that's one experience. And then secondly, we're rolling out formally a mentorship program for underrepresented recruiters, specifically in tech to start, as we continue to pilot that. And fundamentally, I think from where I sit, I've always been a part of conversations around increasing representation in product teams and engineering teams. I think we've all had these conversations, right? And I just sort of took a step back, and we don't really have a ton of these conversations about the folks doing the recruiting. I feel as though it's incredibly important to also address that from the people doing the work standpoint. And then I'm incredibly thankful to Corey and others, leaders in our community, who have stepped up to sort of spend the time with folks and lend that time to mentoring them and helping them advance and succeed in their recruiting careers.
Man, I'm writing down so many notes because I'm like, there's so many, I feel so passionate about this topic. And I'm like, okay, how do I succinctly distill my thoughts here? Because I could probably, if you let me, talk on this for the next 10 and 15 minutes. So I'll try to succinctly bring up my point. But I think, I'm particularly really passionate about this because, again, I've been a huge beneficiary of this. Anchoring back to when I introduced myself, I never, ever could have imagined being in recruiting. Like that was and I think if you talk to most recruiters, it's like, did you grow up wanting to be a recruiter? You're like, no, I just kind of fell into it. And, I knew this person and you kind of get into it through networking. And then, I kind of going all the way back to my college experience. I went to a small school, Connecticut College, the Camels, if anybody wants to know. Lindsay.
My sister went to Connecticut College.
See, there we go.
Oh my gosh, we'll talk offline.
Well, at least there's some harmony because they like different pizza restaurants. So I'm glad
we had a little bit
you've made up on this one.
Okay, now I like you again. Okay, wonderful.
Okay. All right, we're back on track together.
Okay, good.
So I remember going through my university experience in recruiting, and all of these banks and all of these companies would come to the school, and I never saw any representatives from those places that looked like me, which inherently sent me this message that I felt like I didn't belong. That feeling of imposter syndrome of saying, like, even though I have the same, merit and academic accomplishments as my peers, there was always that fear and like going up, because I was like, I'm not good enough. No one looks like me. I don't belong at that place. And so I think that there's this serious theme around representation that needs to happen in the recruiting space, because, if you don't see yourself, you might not put yourself out there. And so I think that as we start to increase the representation of recruiters, naturally, we're going to get more perspectives and more people looking at different things that will then sort of, again, attract more people, right? And so I think, and so when I finally, I got to Target headquarters is where I started my career, and I started on the business side. Again, never thinking recruiting was even an option. And then a mentor came to me and was like, "Hey, I think you should try recruiting. I think that you would do a really good job at it." And I'm like, "Well, what is recruiting?" And so finally, right, I ended up kind of transitioning into recruiting. And along the way, this individual really coached me and gave me the playbook on then how to be successful, right? Because it's one thing to get in the field. It's another thing to how do you stay in the field? How do you be successful? And then how do you grow in a field that, historically has been pretty homogenous, right? When you look at university teams across the industry. So I think it's going to be critical for us as leaders to think about, again, how we're, again, building that pool and reflecting the diversity that we seek for our companies.
Yeah. I'm always, I always think about that experience and that shared experience that so many people have. We hear it from our engineering candidates. We hear it from our candidates within the business. And maybe I can tease this a little bit, Nikki and Lindsay, but Nikki's somewhat aware of this, but, with OneReq, we want to have these conversations. And here in the next few weeks, we'll actually be announcing a new event series that we're doing to specifically address the diversity and the representation of our recruiting teams, and how anybody who's a recruiting leader, how to approach this concept and how to try to start to do things to address it. And that's going to be called OneReq Together. So slight plug. This is breaking news, I think, maybe. I don't know if that's a thing, but we'll be announcing more about that in a few weeks.
Amazing. And we love breaking news. Before I pass to Lindsay to summarize, and good luck today, Ms. Pollock, because you have got quite the summary on your hands. But yeah, quite. I was like, we've got all the points. We were in 5 minutes. You two have given me so much hope. Just the positivity that you've shared, the actions that you both take and are taking to change what we're doing in recruitment, that will invariably, make sure that organizations recruit and retain better talent, more diverse talent. It's exceptional. So thank you so much. What a privilege to have you both on to hear these experiences. And I hope that Lindsay and I can do as much as we can to support everything that you're doing. But yeah, absolutely incredible to just hear. I don't think we've ever had to ask so few questions. We could have gone for probably another 3 hours. It was brilliant. Lindsay, just 3 points to take away from today.
Thank you, Nikki. Beautifully said. The positivity of this session really, really came through. And I think we talked about the negativity of terminology like war for talent and the Great Resignation. There's a lot of positivity in this field as well. And I think both of you are leading it. So to summarize, thank you to Wahab, Owolabi, and Twitty for joining us today, two emerging leaders in the field of emerging talent, and so thoughtful and cutting edge on where this field can go. 3 takeaways. Number 1, the power of community and how important it is to bring people together. Nikki and I have both had the pleasure of being involved with OneReq and URX activities. And it's so important to continue to remember that we're all going through similar challenges and have similar goals in mind. Number 2, the responsibility that we all have to expand the talent pool. And I love this concept of all boats rising together. We can all work together to create more great candidates. Most of us got into the field, as both of you mentioned, because we love emerging talent and we want to create more great young people and shepherd them to the right organizations. We're not competing for talent. We should all band together to create more talent. And finally, the importance of representation and mentoring in the field of recruiting itself for people of color, for underrepresented groups. And I think, as Corey said, just to identify people who would thrive in this field and continue to make sure that the industry grows and is as diverse as our country and the companies that we want to create. A final bonus takeaway is that Corey is a Connecticut College camel, like my dear sister Laura. So we will talk about that offline, but a very nice unexpected twist to our conversation. So thank you, Wahab and Corey, for joining us today.
Thank you
both.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.